Welcome back to Daily Bread Personal Finance, helping Christ followers develop biblical foundations and practices for their personal finances in order to build true wealth that lasts. This is part 6, Investing, Knowing Thyself, and Looking Ahead. In this part, we want to talk a little bit about that long-term bucket, 59 plus, and the importance of setting stuff aside. There's a lot of bad theology that basically says, "Oh, don't even plan for tomorrow." Of course, part of this I think comes from a verse in James where it says, "Only the foolish say tomorrow we will go here and do this and do that," when tomorrow's not guaranteed. Which, of course, I'm not trying to disregard that. It's more of saying, I know exactly what's going to happen in my life. However, Scripture constantly is setting aside and saying, you need to be prepared for the future. At no point does it say, don't even, stop being concerned with, being wise. And I think that's where a lot of people will short-sight their theology and do kind of foolish things with their money because, it's an excuse to not be prepared and not to live wisely when we pick and choose those verses like that. So 53,400, that is the median 401k retirement balance of Americans who are 60 to 65. So people who are retiring right in the middle there have about $53,000. I want you to keep this in mind as we go through here. There's another statistic that's going to come up, and I want you to have this number amount, $53,000, in the back of your mind. So there's 5 what-if questions you need to be able to answer when you're thinking about your long-term planning. If you're watching this, you're already retired. Some of this may not be so important, but especially if you're looking ahead, whether you're in your 50s or whether you're in your 20s, these are all questions you're going to have to be able to answer. And so your long-term financial plan should have answers and steps for each of the following questions. So 1, what if I live too long? Do I have, am I setting aside enough funds right now to ensure that down the road, if I live to be 100 years old and I'm past my 95, 97-year-old cutoff on most term life insurances, that there's money there for me to keep paying my obligations? What if I die too soon? This is a situation, especially for people who are married or have kids. Do you have life insurance? Do you have policies set aside to ensure that the people who are left behind when you're gone are taken care of? What if I become disabled? What if I can't work? If you hurt yourself in such a way that you're not able to work, do you have insurance set aside to be able to supplement your income and to make sure that your bills continue to be paid and that a bad situation doesn't become worse? What if I get sick? This is, making sure you have health insurance, making sure that you have long-term plans that are going to ensure that if something bad happens to you, you're able to handle that and continue to meet your obligations. And then, of course, what if I get paid? So, say you inherit money or you get a big raise or you are able to retire and you have a good amount of money. Do you have a plan in place for that? What is your, what are you going to use those things for? Where are you going to put them? What's your plan for those? So in your long-term planning, that long-term bucket, looking ahead, you need to be able to answer those 5 questions. If you can't, then it's time to work with somebody to be able to answer those. And of course, it says, now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business, make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or do that. So this is that verse I was talking about at the very beginning of this video, James 4:13 through 15. Again, people will piecemeal this and take out bits and pieces and say, we don't have to worry at all or plan at all or be wise with what we do with our money. But instead, it's to say, if it's the Lord's will, we'll live and do this or that. And so it's still thinking ahead. If it is the Lord's will, well, we're going to live. So we need to be able to do this and that. And, of course, I should live as though that is going to be the case, understanding that, God may have other plans. Understand your risk tolerance. So, low cost index funds, I call it index and chill. Actually, a lot of people call it that. But understanding your risk tolerance. Not everybody has the same tolerance to risk. If you come from a very wealthy family and, all of your needs are always going to be taken care of, and you've got lots of money at your disposal, and you've got a nice six-figure job, well, you probably have a higher risk tolerance. You can do slightly more risky things with your money to try to get a better return. But if you are the sole breadwinner, say you work full time and your husband stays home full time with the kids, and you got four kids, and you're not really close to your parents, and they're not very well off, and you don't know what you're the primary person responsible for making sure money's there. Well, if you're investing, you probably don't want to be buying really speculative individual stocks and stuff. So this is where index funds come in. I think even for people who have higher risk tolerance, this is still probably the best place to put your money. And so, of course, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So an example, Netflix stock, it was up really, really high. I think it was in the 600 per share, and it dropped 28% in one day on April 22nd, 2022. They announced a decrease in subscriptions, and bam, the stock price just absolutely gutted. And that's one of those situations where if you had been sitting there putting all your money into it, well, out of nowhere, all of that money is gone. And so it's more important when I say index fund. Again, maybe you don't know a lot about the stock market. Basically, stocks are pieces of companies where you can basically own the company, but you own pieces of it, and it gives you certain rights as a shareholder. As the company becomes more valuable, the pieces of the company become more valuable. And of course, instead of trying to pick which companies are going to do good and which ones are going to do bad, because we really don't know, you can buy what's called an index fund. So if you were to buy the top 500 biggest companies in the US by weight, then you would buy the S&P 500. You can buy one share of that, and it would be one piece of that whole index, which is pieces of all of those companies. And so it's the best way to spread out the risk, but also to get the gains, because that tends to beat all the other indexes. And so don't look for the needle in the haystack. Instead, like I said with the S&P 500, just own the whole haystack. If you buy shares of the whole thing, you don't sit there and guess or try to become a business expert. You can kind of rest assured that as good as the broad market does, your retirement is doing. And of course, low expense ratio, passive managed, broad market exposure. So these are the three big things you need to look for. Expense ratio, that's really, you can find that on any mutual fund, any index fund. That should be less than 0.1. Personally, my personal experience, it could be, a quarter of a percent. A lot of them will try to be like 2.5. You don't want that. You want something very low. You want it passively managed. Actively managed funds have been proven to not perform that much better, if not performing worse than passively managed. And then broad market exposure. If you get really, niche down, then of course you're getting back into the stock picking thing, which I don't recommend for the average person. Luke 12:13-21. Sometimes we take too big of a risk. So it talks about the rich fool. He builds these big barns. He assumes they'll be able to take life easy. They'll eat, drink, they'll be merry finally. Only in an instant he loses it all, including his own life. And so it's important to understand your risks, understand your values, and to plan accordingly. Of course, then you also the parable of the talents, being too conservative, playing it too safe. So there's three of these servants, and they're giving this money while their master's gone. Two go out and they double their investments. One of them gets very fearful. He buries it in the ground because he worries if the master comes back and the money's gone, then he'll get in trouble. Well, of course, I want to go back to that. Of course, by living too fearfully, the money becomes worth less because time value of money, which we'll talk about. Whereas the ones who are too risky, they're in Luke, they lose it all. And so it's important to find that fine line, know what your tolerance is, pick a strategy that fits in with that. And so that's kind of why I've mentioned before in earlier videos, I'm not going to try to tell you exactly what to do with your money. I think low cost index funds are the best way to go, but that may not fit your situation. You may need something a little more conservative or a little more risky, and that totally depends on your situation. And that's not my place to tell you what to do. So 315,000. Remember 53,400. That was that number in that earlier slide. That's the median amount of retirement funds in people who are currently retired right now. $315,000 is the average amount of medical expenses 2022 retirees can expect to spend throughout their retirement. So not even a sixth of the amount that a person is going to spend in retirement is actually in their retirement accounts currently. So that's a big challenge if you think about it. At minimum, this is the amount of money you should probably try to have in retirement, because that's just going to cover your medical expenses, which is your number one cost in retirement and the most expensive thing in your later years. So something to be prepared for. This is where an HSA account, a high yield, a health savings account, if you have a high deductible health plan, this is where these are really beneficial because they're triple tax advantaged and they can be used in retirement. They grow like an investment, and then you can use them in retirement to pay for these medical expenses. So there's definitely some tools out there that can help you to be wise in keeping this in mind, but just something to consider if you're approaching retirement and you're in that 53,000 category. It's time to start making some plans, because this is the number which probably will only get worse, that you'll probably have to be able to think about. So two things: the time value of money and professional help. So money's not worth the same as it is tomorrow. There's the question: when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the second best time to plant a tree? Today. They say compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And so the time value of money basically says a dollar today is worth more than a dollar tomorrow. And the reason for that is a dollar today can be put to use. It can gain interest. So if you have an interest account that earns 4% interest and you earn $1, your dollar today is worth $1.04 compared to the dollar tomorrow, if that makes sense. And so compound interest, of course, is where you have, you have that 4% interest account. Well, after this year, it's worth $1.04. Next year, it's going to be $1.04 times 1.04. And then the same thing the next year and the next year and the next year. And so that interest is compounding on top of itself. And so I should have put a chart in here or something, but it's crazy how quickly that can create exponential growth. And that's why it's so important to start saving much, much earlier than to wait till, later dates, because of the vast difference in how much it takes to achieve the same goal if you start earlier versus if you start later. And of course, professional help. I've mentioned earlier, this course is not designed to provide professional investing help. Personal finance is exactly that. It's personal. There's no one-size-fits-all approaches. And so if you're watching some of this and you're thinking, man, I really do need some outside help, make sure that whoever you work with is a fiduciary. That term is very important. This is somebody who is bound to work in the interest of others. If they aren't a fiduciary, you do not want to work with them. They're not bound by the same requirements. So you want to look for someone who's a CFP, a CPA, financial advisor. It needs to be someone that you can trust. Don't just pick whoever has the best ad. You should be able to trust this person because they are dealing with something very important, which is your future. You need to avoid red flag phrases, things like guaranteed return, hot tip, opportunity of lifetime, hurry and get in now, beat the market, can't lose, risk-free, active asset allocation strategy, we can cap your downside, the charts indicate, no one else knows how to do this. Those kinds of phrases are good phrases that when you hear it, you should be running as fast as you can in the opposite direction. In the words of Nancy Reagan, just say no. So I talked about time value of money. It's funny, this actually has a lot of typos in it. But basically, you got your future value, you got your present value, And so the value of a future dollar is worth less than the value of a current dollar. And so it's important with the money you have today to be putting it to good use. And so your long-term bucket, funding 59 plus, Exodus 16:24-30. There was no manna on the seventh day. If you recall that story at all, the manna came days 1 through 6. They had to gather twice as much on day 6. And the people who went out on day 7, they found nothing. And so when you reach the end of your earning potential, you're either grateful for your diligence or you're kicking yourself for resting too soon and counting on windfalls that may never materialize. And then, of course, I can't stress enough the importance of important documents. These are what I would call acts of love. It's the gift of peace of mind for your loved ones. You need to have a will and a trust. You need, especially if you have children or if you have complicated assets like houses or farms or anything like that. If you have kids, you want to make sure your kids are going to go to somebody that you trust to raise them. There's nothing worse than your child being put into probate and having to go through all of that. That's hard for your kid. That's hard for your family. And there's a lot of uncertainty there. So if you love your kids, make sure you have a will and a trust. Make sure you have a power of attorney so that people, it's clear who has to make what decisions. You have an advanced healthcare directive, so they already know what decisions you would want them to make their life easier instead of making them have to make those tough decisions under such stress. And Jeremiah 32:1-44, it talks about Jeremiah going and buying this field. They're in the middle of exile, and he goes and buys this barren field. And it is in itself an act of trusting God to provide, even while the world seems to be in chaos. There's been siege laid, everything's being destroyed, and he's going out and he's buying real estate. Why would you do that? Well, the passage essentially highlights, look, I trust that at the end of the day, God's going to work things out, and this is an act of trust to do that. And so, in a sense, to invest in retirement, to make sure that you're setting yourself up well, that you're setting your family up well, that is, in a sense, buying that field while in exile, knowing that way, way down the road, if I act in trust, God acts in faithfulness. And so for the end of this video, I know this was a shorter one, look at your risk factors and try to do a long-term assessment. Try to figure out, okay, am I on track? Look at, actually log into your retirement accounts. It's a good thing to do. See how much is in there, see what it's invested in. A lot of people don't realize just because your money goes into a 401k, you still have to go in and tell it what to invest that in. If your money goes into an IRA, a Roth IRA, you have to go in there and tell that account what funds to put it in. So go and actually look at that, look at the expense ratios, look at the investment strategy, read through some of the documents, and get some help. Ask some people around you, and again, listen for some of those key phrases, but actually sit down and look at some of this stuff. However old you are, however young you are, it's important to do that now so that you don't get down the road and have unexpected surprises. Sit down and look at, okay, just do an inventory real quick. What documents do I have that people would need if I was gone tomorrow? Make sure that you have those as well. And, just try to figure out where you're at. Because again, if you figure out where you're at, where you want to go, you can decide, okay, what adjustments do I need to make in order to get there? So I appreciate you watching this one. I will see you in video 7, giving, and I look forward to talking with you some more there.